Picture a family tree that should exist but does not. You are looking at the genealogical records of defeated royal houses across the Mediterranean and Near East between 200 before Christ and 200 of the Common Era.
Hundreds of documented royal families. Thousands of recorded princesses, queens, and daughters of kings. Follow their lineages forward past the moment of Roman conquest. They vanish.
Not gradually. Not through natural demographic decline. Within one generation of Roman victory, the female royal bloodlines of defeated kingdoms simply stop appearing in any historical record.
No marriages to Roman families. No descendants in conquered territories. No integration into the new order.
Modern geneticists studying populations across former kingdoms, Macedon, Pontus, Judea, Gaul, Britannia, have found something that violates basic demographic mathematics.
The maternal genetic markers that should exist from royal lineages are not there. The royal female lines were terminated so thoroughly that their genetic signature was erased from the populations they once ruled.
This is absence as evidence. Where are the descendants?
This is absence as evidence. Where are the descendants? Here is what the silence is hiding. The daughters of defeated kings faced a fate so systematic, so thoroughly understood by the victims themselves, that historical sources preserve their choices in the hours before Roman commanders arrived.
They chose death, not as martyrdom, not as resistance, as the preferable alternative to what Roman triumph protocol designated for royal captive women.
Let me reconstruct one voice from the void. We will call her Aelia, though that was not her name. Her name was erased, along with everything else. She was approximately 16 years old in 63 before Christ when Pontus fell to Pompey the Great. She was the daughter of Mithridates VI, one of Rome's most dangerous enemies. Her father had 54 documented children. After the Roman victory, the number who survived to leave any historical trace can be counted on one hand. Aelia would have been in the royal palace when word arrived that resistance had collapsed. Modern archaeology of Pontic royal sites shows evidence of mass destruction in private quarters before Roman entry, not from siege damage, but from deliberate actions by the inhabitants themselves. Fires set from inside, chambers sealed from within, bodies found in positions suggesting they died before the gates were breached. She would have understood exactly why. Think about what that means. A teenager who knows with absolute certainty that she needs to die before the army outside reaches her. Here is what she was avoiding.
The Roman triumph was the highest honor the Republic could grant a victorious general. It was a public procession through the city of Rome, a spectacular display of conquest.
The triumph had a precise structure, documented in multiple historical sources, refined over centuries into an art form of humiliation. The captives were part of the performance. Royal prisoners were displayed in the procession, chained, dressed in their conquered nation's regalia. They walked through streets lined with Roman citizens who had been given a public holiday to watch. The procession ended at the Temple of Jupiter. Here is what happened to the royal captives after the triumph.
The defeated king, if he had survived to be captured, was typically executed immediately after the procession, strangled in the Tullianum, the underground prison beneath the Forum. This was considered merciful, quick, clean, finished. The royal women were not executed, they were distributed.
The Latin term was praeda bellica, spoils of war. Roman law from the period is explicit. Captive women were property. They were allocated to officers, soldiers, and political allies as rewards for service. The distribution was recorded in military ledgers, tracked like any other captured resource. You are looking at bureaucracy applied to human beings.
The ledgers still exist in fragments. Archaeological discoveries from Roman military archives preserve allocation lists, names, or more often just descriptions, of captive women.
Their age, their origin, their royal status, and then a name, the Roman officer to whom they were assigned.
One female, Royal House of Pontus, age 15, allocated to tribune Marcus Cornelius. That is not a person. That is inventory. Here is the thing that should permanently change how you understand Roman conquest. This was not an unfortunate byproduct of war. This was strategic policy. The Roman military understood exactly what they were doing when they systematically eliminated royal female lineages.
Royal legitimacy in most ancient societies passed through both male and female lines. A daughter of a king carried hereditary authority. Her children could claim the throne.
Her marriage created political alliances. Her survival meant the possibility of restoration, rebellion, or rival claims to power. Rome's solution was biological elimination. Not through execution, that would create martyrs and preserve the dignity of the royal house. Through forced integration into Roman society in a condition of total subordination. The royal bloodline was diluted, absorbed, and transformed from a source of legitimate power into the children of property. The destroyed future is the point. Aelia would not have children who could claim the throne of Pontus. She would have children, if she survived long enough, who would be the legal property of a Roman citizen.
Her bloodline would continue, but her lineage, the thing that made her royal, would be terminated. This is the distinction between death and extinction.
If you believe that the systematic erasure of hereditary legitimacy through the bodies of women deserves to be remembered as a deliberate policy, not an incidental tragedy, subscribe and turn on notifications. What you are about to learn was recorded in Roman military procedure manuals. The system had infrastructure. Holding facilities existed in conquered territories, specifically for processing high-value captives before transport to Rome. Archaeological excavations of Roman military camps across the former territories of defeated kingdoms have uncovered structures that do not match standard military architecture. Rooms with reinforced doors that lock from the outside. Capacity for dozens of individuals, located in secure zones within the camp perimeter. These were not standard barracks. These were not prisoner of war camps for soldiers. These were processing centers for captives destined for the triumph. The archaeological evidence shows something disturbing about their operation. The facilities were maintained for extended periods, months or even years after conquest. Defeated kingdoms did not produce triumphs immediately. The general had to wait for senatorial approval, travel to Rome, and organize the spectacle. The captives had to be preserved during that time, preserved in a condition suitable for public display. Roman sources occasionally reference the preparation process. Captive royalty were cleaned, dressed in their national costume, and provided with enough food to remain healthy in appearance. The triumph required them to look like royalty, defeated royalty, but recognizably royal. The visual contrast between their noble bearing and their chained condition was part of the spectacle's power. You are looking at people being curated for performance. Now follow the timeline from the captive's perspective. Defeat happens. Capture happens. Transport to a holding facility. Months of waiting, knowing exactly what the waiting is for. Then transport to Rome. Then the triumph itself. Hours of public display, walking through crowds, subjected to the gaze of thousands. Then distribution. The daughter of a king becomes property. The legal transformation happens in an instant. Roman law was clear. Captive women had no rights, no citizenship, no legal personhood. They were things. Think about the girls who understood this timeline. 16 years old, royal, educated. They knew Roman history. They knew what happened to the captive women of Carthage, Macedon, and Syria. They had exact historical precedent for their own future. Some of them chose to interrupt the timeline. Historical sources preserve fragments of these moments. Appian's History of the Mithridatic Wars mentions that many of Mithridates' family chose death before Roman capture. Plutarch's Life of Pompey notes that few of the royal women survived to be brought to Rome. Josephus records that during the siege of Jerusalem, noble women killed their children and then themselves rather than face Roman captivity. The sources present this as noble Roman resistance, martyrdom, patriotic sacrifice. That is not what it was.
It was rational risk assessment. The daughters were not choosing death over national loyalty. They were choosing death over systematic erasure administered through their bodies. They were choosing non-existence over existence as property.
They were choosing to terminate their own bloodline, rather than have it forcibly absorbed into the lineage of their conquerors. This is the moment when erasure becomes preferable to survival.
Here is what the archaeological evidence reveals about the final hours of royal households. At sites across the Mediterranean, Pontic palaces, Gallic royal compounds, Judean fortresses, excavations have found patterns in the destruction layers. Concentrations of bodies in private chambers, particularly women's quarters, evidence of poison, residue in vessels, bone analysis showing toxic compounds, jewelry still on the bodies, indicating these were high-status individuals who died before looters arrived. Signs of fire set from inside rooms after the occupants were already dead. These are not battle casualties. These are administered deaths conducted by the inhabitants themselves before the final breach.
The royal households had poison ready. Think about what that preparation means. These families knew, before the siege even began, that they might need to choose collective death.
They had the means prepared in advance. The decision had already been made, contingent only on the outcome of the battle. The daughters grew up knowing that death might be necessary.
We do not have Elia's words. We have no letters, no diary, no testimony. But we have Josephus's account of the siege of Jerusalem, where he records the words of women choosing death.
One mother, killing her children before her own suicide, is quoted, "This way you remain mine." That is the logic of erasure speaking through a victim. The children remain hers, her lineage, her legacy, her blood, only if they die before Rome can claim them. If they live to be captured, they become Roman property.
Their children will be Roman. The lineage is erased through continuation. Death preserves identity. Survival destroys it. This is the paradox that the daughters understood.
If what you have just learned about the industrial machinery of bloodline termination makes you feel something, outrage, disbelief, grief, good. That means the erasure is failing.
Like this video so that the algorithm carries this memory further than the silence intended.
Now, let us talk about scale. Elia is one reconstructed individual. How many others face the same calculation? The historical record documents at least 40 major Roman triumphs between 200 before Christ and 200 of the Common Era that celebrated victories over kingdoms with established royal houses.
Each of those kingdoms had royal families. Conservative demographic estimates suggest a minimum of 10 to 20 royal women of marriageable or pre-marriageable age per kingdom.
That's a minimum of 400 to 800 royal women who would have been eligible for the triumph protocol. Genetic analysis of modern populations in these former kingdoms shows a statistical void where these maternal lineages should be. The royal female genetic markers are not there.
Population geneticists have published studies showing that the expected genetic diversity from royal intermarriage with local populations is absent in regions that experienced Roman conquest.
The bloodlines were terminated, not diminished, not reduced. Terminated. Here is what that termination looked like at the moment of implementation. Picture the holding facility. Dozens of women and girls. They know where they are going. They know what happens after the triumph. They know the timeline. They have perhaps weeks or months to live in certainty of their future as property. Some historical sources suggest that suicide in these facilities was common enough that Roman commanders issued specific orders to prevent it. Guards were posted not just to prevent escape, but also to prevent self-inflicted death. The captives had to be kept alive and in good health until the triumph. You are looking at people being preserved against their will for a performance of their own subjugation. The level of control required is staggering. Remove anything that could be used for suicide. Constant observation. Forced feeding if necessary. The Roman military had protocols for maintaining high-value captives in a condition suitable for public display while preventing them from exercising the only choice they had left. The system had thought of everything.
Now think about the girls who made it to the triumph. They walked through Rome in chains. They were displayed to crowds, and then they were distributed to Roman officers. What happened next was not recorded in detail because it was not considered historically significant. The lives of enslaved women do not appear in Roman historical sources, except when they intersect with the lives of important men. We have no testimony from the women themselves, no letters, no accounts. We have only the legal framework that governed their existence and the demographic void where their descendants should be. Roman law was explicit about the status of children born to enslaved women. The children belonged to the woman's owner, regardless of who the father was. If a Roman officer fathered a child with a captive royal woman, the child was not the officer's heir. The child was his property. The royal bloodline produced property, not heirs. This is extinction through continuation. The genes persist. The lineage is erased. Here is what modern genetics reveals. Population studies of regions conquered by Rome show standard patterns of genetic mixing between conquering and conquered populations, with one exception. The expected genetic signature from royal female lineages is absent, but genetic markers from the general population of those same kingdoms are present in modern descendants. Common women from defeated kingdoms integrated into the genetic mix of Roman-controlled populations. Royal women did not. The erasure was targeted. The system specifically eliminated the bloodlines that carried hereditary legitimacy while allowing the general population to continue.
This was not genocide. The peoples survived. This was aristocraticide, the systematic termination of the ruling lineages through the forced absorption and subordination of royal women. Think about the precision required. You cannot eliminate royal bloodlines by accident. You have to identify them, capture them specifically, and process them in a way that prevents the continuation of their legitimacy. Rome had a system for this. The Triumph Protocol was not just spectacle, it was bureaucratic processing of bloodline termination. The public display, the legal transformation to property, the distribution to officers, each step systematically dismantled hereditary legitimacy. And it worked. The dynasties that Rome defeated did not return. There were no restoration movements led by royal descendants. There were no pretenders claiming legitimacy through maternal lineage. The bloodlines that could have sustained resistance or rival claims to power were eliminated within one generation. The silence in the historical record is proof of the system's success. Now return to Aelia in the hours before Roman entry. She is 16. She is a princess. She knows exactly what happens to captive royal women.
She has historical precedent. She has contemporary examples. Sisters, cousins, noblewomen from allied kingdoms who have already been processed through the Triumph system. She has poison available.
The choice is this: die now as herself, with her identity intact, or survive to have that identity systematically erased, her body transformed into property, her future children classified as things.
She chooses poison. The archaeological record suggests many made the same choice. The concentration of noble female bodies in private quarters, the evidence of poison, the timing before the final breach, all indicate that this was a pattern, not isolated incidents.
The daughters chose extinction over erasure. Here is what that choice cost them. Everything. Life, future, the possibility of children, the chance that circumstances might improve. They died in absolute certainty that no rescue was coming, no reversal was possible, no alternative existed. And here is what that choice prevented. It prevented Rome from processing them through the system. It prevented their bloodlines from being forcibly absorbed. It prevented their identities from being legally transformed into property. It prevented their children from being classified as things. They died as princesses. They would have survived as objects. The choice was between two forms of death, physical death or identity death. They chose the one that preserved who they were, even if only for the hours they had left. This is what erasure looks like when the victims understand the mechanism. This is what erasure looks like when the victims understand the mechanism.
Here is what happened to the ones who did not choose poison. We have fragmentary evidence from the triumph of Pompey in 60 and 1 before Christ. The sources list the captives displayed: the family of Mithridates, the royal house of Armenia, nobles from Syria. The descriptions are brief. Names, when they are recorded at all, appear once and then never again in Roman sources. They entered the triumph as royalty. They exited as property. And then they disappeared from history.
Not because they died, because they stopped mattering. Roman sources track the lives of important men. The women who became the property of those men are not important. They are background, context. Possessions that occasionally get mentioned when relevant to their owner's biography. The erasure is in the silence.
Thousands of women processed through this system over 2 centuries of Roman expansion. Thousands of bloodlines terminated. And the historical record preserves almost nothing about their experience, because the experience of property is not considered historically significant.
You are looking at systematic erasure through bureaucratic indifference. The Triumph Protocol did not need to explicitly order the destruction of records. It just needed to transform the women into a category of person whose life was not worth recording.
The legal transformation to property accomplished that automatically. No monument exists for them, no memorial. No archaeological site is designated as a commemoration of the daughters who chose death over Roman triumph.
The historical sites where they died are identified by the battles fought there, not by the last acts of the royal women who understood what defeat meant. The erasure is still maintained. Academic histories of Rome's expansion focus on military campaigns, political consequences, and territorial acquisition. The systematic termination of royal bloodlines through the bodies of women is treated as incidental, unfortunate perhaps, but not central to understanding Roman conquest.
That's the erasure speaking through modern scholarship. The silence that began with the transformation of identity to property continues in the academic neglect of their fate. The void in the genetic record is matched by a void in historical consciousness.
Here is what survived, despite everything. The archaeological evidence of the moments before Roman entry, the poison residue, the bodies in private chambers, the fires set from within. These physical traces preserve the final acts of women whose names were erased from every other record. The bones remember what the documents deny. Modern forensic archaeology can analyze those remains, age at death, signs of poison, jewelry and clothing that indicate status, and the position of the body that suggests the circumstances of death. The physical evidence reconstructs what the written sources refuse to acknowledge, that royal women chose death in patterns consistent with a systematic, rational response to a known threat.
The pattern is the proof. Additionally, the genetic void itself is evidence. Population geneticists can calculate what maternal lineages should exist based on documented royal genealogies.
They can compare expected genetic diversity to actual diversity in modern populations. The absence of the expected markers is not random. It is a measurable void that corresponds precisely to the historical period of Roman triumph protocol.
The DNA does not lie. And finally, there are the fragments in historical sources, the brief mentions, quickly passed over, that admit what happened. Appian's note that many of Mithridates' family chose death. Plutarch's observation that few of the royal women survived. Josephus's detailed account of noble women's suicides during the siege of Jerusalem. The sources acknowledge the pattern while declining to examine its meaning. These fragments, archaeological, genetic, textual, are what survived the erasure. They are small, they are scattered, they have been largely ignored by scholarship focused on military and political history.
But they are there. They prove that the daughters existed. They prove that the daughters understood what awaited them. They prove that many chose death. And they prove that the choice was rational, a calculated decision to preserve identity through extinction rather than lose it through survival. The trace breaks the silence. Return one last time to Aelia. She died in 63 before Christ, possibly by poison, possibly by her own hand, possibly with the help of family members who understood what she faced. Her name was not Aelia.
We do not know her name. Her father had 54 documented children. History preserves detailed records of only a handful. She disappeared from every record except the archaeological trace. Her bones, if they were found, would be classified as female, approximately 16 years old, with high-status burial goods and evidence of toxic compounds. The excavation report would note that she died before the Roman entry to the palace. It might observe that this pattern, young noblewomen dying in private quarters before the final breach, appears at multiple sites across the region. It probably would not say what that pattern means, but you know now. She died to prevent Rome from processing her through the Triumph Protocol. She died to prevent her bloodline from being transformed into property. She died to remain herself for the hours she had left, rather than survive as the legal possession of a Roman officer.
She chose extinction over erasure, and she was one of hundreds, possibly thousands, across 2 centuries of Roman expansion who made the same calculation and the same choice. No justice was served. The Roman commanders who designed and implemented the Triumph Protocol prospered. Pompey the Great, who triumphed over dozens of kingdoms and processed countless royal captives through the system, was honored by Rome and is remembered as one of history's great military leaders. The officers who received royal women as property suffered no consequences. The system operated exactly as designed. It ended not because Rome developed a moral objection, but because Rome ran out of kingdoms to conquer. The Triumph Protocol faded from use in the imperial period, not because anyone recognized its horror, but because the nature of Roman expansion changed. The system did not stop due to ethical awakening. It stopped because the military circumstances that fed it ceased to exist. Victorious generals dined in lavish halls, while shadows of unnamed daughters lingered in empty chambers, their faces lost to history. The daughters who chose death over processing remain unnamed in the historical record. Royal daughters stand at castle windows, faces resolute as soldiers approach, their choice clear in the fading light.
The erasure succeeded. Except for this. You now know. Ancient bones lie buried beneath cracked stone, while empty pedestals stand in forgotten temples, silent witnesses to vanished bloodlines.
You know that royal women chose death in patterns consistent with a rational response to systematic erasure. A lone figure, cloaked in shadow, breaks silence with a whispered truth beneath a moonlit sky.
You know that their bloodlines were targeted for termination through the Triumph Protocol. You know that the genetic and archaeological evidence proves the scope of the erasure.
You know that no monument exists for them, and no mainstream historical narrative centers their experience. Candles flicker in a darkened hall, each flame a memory kept alive by unseen hands. Your knowledge is the trace that survived. By watching this video to the end, you have become one of the few people who understand that the daughters of defeated kings begged to die, not from despair, but from absolute clarity about the alternative. You have learned what the silence was hiding. Subscribe. Turn on notifications. Share this with someone. Drop a comment. Tell me which aspect of the Triumph Protocol's machinery affected you most, or what other systematic erasures you suspect history is still hiding. Your engagement is the memorial they never received. Your memory is the proof that erasure, no matter how systematic, is never total. The daughters are gone. The bloodlines are terminated. The system prospered, but the bones remain. The genetic void remains. And now, your knowledge remains. The silence has been broken.